De Morgan was beat. William of Ockham, a 14th century philosopher from the Middle Ages, beat De Morgan by centuries. Now, De Morgan's law, of course, comes from the 19th century. That's when De Morgan lived. But good logicians knew this law hundreds of years prior to that. Ockham notes this in his magnus opus on logic. So, say what you will about Ockham. In fact, the great conservative intellectual Richard Weaver had him as a villain in his powerful book, Ideas Have Consequences. Still, Ockham at least knew a great deal about logic. To quote William of Ockham, it should also be noted that the contradictory opposition of a conjunctive proposition is a disjunctive proposition composed of the contradictories of the parts of the conjunctive. So what does that mean? We have a conjunction, such as P and Q. We're thinking about it as contradictory. In other words, we're denying it. So what is that logically equivalent to? Is a disjunction composed of the contradictories of the parts of the conjunctive. So the contradictory of P, the contradictory of Q. Thus we have not P or not Q. And moreover, it should also be noted that the contradictory opposite of a disjunctive proposition is a conjunctive proposition composed of the contradictories of the parts of the disjunctive proposition. So what does this mean? So we have a disjunctive proposition, such as P or Q. We want the contradictory of that, so we're denying it, not parentheses P or Q, close parentheses. That happens to be logically equivalent to a conjunctive proposition composed of the contradictories of the parts of the disjunctive proposition. So the contradictory of P, the contradictory of Q. Thus we have not P and not Q. For example, it's not true is both hot and sunny. So what makes this statement is both hot and sunny false? What's the contradictory of that? So if that's false, that means it must be false that it's hot, or it must be false that it's sunny. So we have it's not hot, or it's not sunny. We can see that those two statements are logically equivalent. How about another example? It's not true that Dawkins is a theist or McAfee is a theist. So what would make this false? It's false that Dawkins is a theist or McAfee is a theist. It's true if one of those two is true. So it's false if both are not the case. And so we have, it's not true that Dawkins is a theist, and it's not true that McAfee is a theist. Moreover, perhaps it should be noted that we can expand out De Morgan, so to speak, in the sense that, let's say, we have something like this, P sub 1 or P sub 2 or ... etc., or P sub n, and we're saying that's not the case. So what's the contradictory of this disjunction? So that would have to be logically equivalent to not P sub 1 and not P sub 2 and so on and so forth to not P sub n. Likewise, if we had P sub 1 and P sub 2 and so on and so forth to P sub n, if we have the contradictory of that, or we might say this would be equivalent to this, in other words, not P sub 1, or not P sub 2, or, and so forth, down to not P sub n. In any case, contrary to the claim that the Middle Ages did not develop any philosophy or logic or whatnot, this is an easy example showing that that is false. We have the medievalist philosopher William of Ockham already knowing what we now call De Morgan's law.